Welcome back to another episode of Team Building Tips with Dan Talbot. We'll be right back with Dan, but we want to give a shout out to our podcast partners, We Coach and the Global Community of Women in High School Sports, two great organizations that you should be a part of. And now let's hear a quick word from our sponsors. We want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive for their support of the podcast. Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards not only generate income for your department, but they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com to see exactly what their fantastic products can do for you. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com. We also want to say thanks to Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. You know, they're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They've got a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles and an entire library of templates to help recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. Let them help you showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments, and go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. You can also email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com to get started. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school's record boards or your Hall of Fame, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. We want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com. They're going to show you how to set up and sell tickets at your school online. They'll show you how to scan the attendees that come to your games and collect your revenue. And every step of the way, you're going to have a dedicated client success manager that's providing hands-on support. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com, and they'll also show you how to set up and sell tickets for things like school dances, school plays and concerts, even graduation. That's hometownticketing.com. Simple and easy online ticketing. We also want to say thanks to Snap Mobile. Snap Mobile is a platform that has several different divisions that are designed to help athletic directors build their program. Snap Raise is one of the more well-known ones. This is their fundraising platform, and our coaches use Snap Raise with great success, and you can too. Go to onsnap.com, that's onsnap.com, and check out all the different facets of their platform. Snap Spend is their secure and transparent money management solution, primarily for clubs. Snap Store provides high-quality custom spirit gear for everybody in your program. Snap Manage is their website platform that will allow you to build an entire website for your athletic department. And Snap Connect is their secure multilingual family engagement platform that allows you to support every family in your community. Go to onsnap.com or contact your Snap Mobile representative to get the support you need. That's onsnap.com. We want to thank Gipper for their support. Go to Gipper.com and see how athletic directors and coaches are creating world-class marketing content for their school social media channels. You can do it in seconds on any device, and you don't need any design experience. It's so easy, even I can do it. Go to Gipper.com and tell them you heard about it on the podcast and use the podcast code ADPOD10 and get 10% off. That's Gipper.com. Create custom branded content for your school's social media channel. We also want to say thanks to Huddle. Go to huddle.com. Huddle is how the world sees sports. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but as an athletic director, our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches just love the smart cameras, the mobile apps. Of course, they love the analytics, but there's so much more. Huddle has the tools to help every team, every coach, every athlete play at their highest level. Huddle has a complete solution for your athletic department. And if you go to huddle.com, you're going to see how to turn your school into a Huddle school. We believe in sports, and teams believe in Huddle. Go to huddle.com and turn your school into a Huddle school. We want to say thanks to Final Forms, the industry leader in forms and registration. But Final Forms is so much more than that. Final Forms can help your stakeholders with things like mobile accessibility. They've got reminders for parents about policies, about physicals, and all the forms that come when you have an athlete in the house. Final Forms can help your coaches with attendance and communication. And for athletic directors, Final Forms can help you with eligibility, with rosters, and all the reports that come across your desk. It's time that you walked with a team that's been in your shoes. To take the next steps, go to finalforms.com/Jake. That's finalforms.com/Jake to get started with Final Forms. We also want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack. Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. At my schools, we use surveys for just about everything, for teachers, for coaches, for kids, and for parents. And the information that came back on these surveys was almost always positive. But surveys also allow that squeaky wheel parent to vent a little bit. And sometimes they would share a small issue that you could address and keep it from turning into a big issue because you didn't know about it because you hadn't done a survey. Go to athleticsurveys.com or email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out. Talk to the folks at Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack and let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Team Building Tips with Dan Talbot. For new listeners, Dan is a certified master athletic administrator, longtime AD here in Florida. He's also our state coordinator for certification, and he's very active at the national level. We do this every week. This is episode number 25. So, Dan, what do you have for us this week on team building tips?
All right. So today, one thing we were going to discuss, basically, not everything's perfect in a perfect world, but we're going to discuss today basically dealing with your coaches that don't have any educational background. So what we call them community coaches here in Polk County, non-school, non-faculty coaches. Everyone has a different term, but they're basically, they're coaches that are in your program that really have no educational background. They don't understand educational-based athletics. And I think, with those coaches, you really have to sit down with them and kind of lay out the expectations, because club sports, AAU sports is a different setting than educational-based athletics. And I think, if you don't sit down and have those conversations with your community coaches in those scenarios that could pop up, things could be disastrous for you. One thing they have to understand is, it's education first, and they're a student athlete first. You're not in a club type situation or AAU or any of those non-school teams that don't check grades. You have to make sure kids are in school, checking their grades. There's a different expectation. There's a different standard that they need to meet and adapt to versus those outside non-school sports. For instance, one thing is, trying to think what we deal with on attendance. There's no attendance in requirements for non-school sports. What we do, you got to be in attendance a half a day of school in order to participate in athletics that day. If you're in school suspension, you can't participate in a game that day if you're in school suspension. You have to think of ways as the athletic director to basically monitor those, because your community coach doesn't have access to all that information. So there needs to be a plan in place as the athletic administrator to provide all that information with them. I think everyone's first choice, we'd love to have a teacher coach, because it does make your life as an administrator easier. But as we're seeing more and more, as teachers are given more responsibilities in the classroom and their teaching duties, less and less are wanting to then stay after school and coach. So we are relying on community coaches more and more to service our needs looking for coaches. But with that comes the expectation of expanding policies and procedures in the educational world, the school's policies and procedures, your administration's policies and procedures. There's a lot of things that we take for granted as athletic administrators when dealing with a teacher who is also a coach, because they understand the educational based setting that they're in, than a community coach that doesn't. So it's the AD's responsibility to then relay the expectations, the policies, procedures, and try to get them to think like an educational based person.
Yeah, and again, we talked about this in a previous chapter, but the pendulum has certainly swung tremendously far from where, when you and I were in school. I'm older than you, but back then it was the rare exception to have a community coach, and now it's in many schools it's the norm. So we talked previously about, with coaches meetings, making sure you schedule meetings that allow that community coach the opportunity to have some of these meetings and get this information. But what are some of the key things that you are trying to share with your coaches? Let's kind of take a little deeper dive on that, as far as the difference between what we call educational based athletics and, again, AAU club travel type sports, where many of these community coaches get their start.
Yeah, it's different. It's night and day compared to the non-school athletic programs that you see run on the weekends or at night or during the summer. What we refer to as club or travel sports. The educational setting is very different. The expectations are higher. We require parent meetings. You have to deal with parents in educational based athletics. If you're a club coach or AAU coach, and I'm not saying quit high school coaching and go deal with them so you don't have to deal with parents, but the expectation is that you have to communicate with parents at some level, at some level, in some form, all the time. I mean, you got to understand that, parents are dropping off their most precious commodity, which is their son or daughter, and entrusting you, and basically more so entrusting the school to then take care of that son or daughter of theirs, to make sure that they're well taken care of, their well-being is first and foremost, that they're safe, that the parents can go to work and not have to worry about their child while they're at practice, while they're at school. All that is entrusted upon us at the club and community coach or the club level or the outside organizations. It's vastly different. And, basically kicking kids off team, there needs to be an explanation why. How you handle things. Non-school coaches, it's like the free range to do whatever you want. If you don't like it, leave. It's a little bit different in the educational based setting. There needs to be checks and balances, justification for why you're doing things and why you're not doing things. A perfect example is we had one community coach basically say he wants to monitor all social media. Well, they didn't have a parent meeting to explain that I just want to keep an eye on things. Now the parents are in an uproar about he wants to follow my son or daughter on social media. That's kind of weird. We've never happened that before. So a lot of those things get lost in translation. If you have a community coach and they have policies and procedures, you as an athletic administrator need to look over those before they get into the hands of parents, because the intent may be good, but the wording or phrase that they use could be a cause for some concerns.
Yeah, that's the whole social media thing is a minefield. Dan, you've been doing this for a long time, and you're currently, I think you said you had 17 schools, high schools that you're in charge of at Polk County. What's an example? I'm putting you on the spot here. What's an example of one of your community coaches who has just really done a great job? And it was kind of like, wow, I didn't think of that, or wow, that's a really cool way to connect with parents, or just an example of them really embracing the educational athletics experience.
Well, I think we have numerous softball coaches in our district that are community coaches, and softball and soccer seem to be one of the highest forms of, I guess, percentage of community coaches that are involved in our athletic program. But we have one softball coach in particular that does a great job. A lot of coaches don't like parents at practice. This coach says, I have nothing to hide. His maturity level, his confidence in himself, parents are welcome at practice. Instead of saying he has an open door policy, he does practice the open door policy. He allows parents, he has basically a tryout meeting. He explains the process of how he's going to select the best players for the team prior to the meeting. So he's already met with a majority of the parents. And then once the team is selected, they have another parent meeting to discuss the policies and procedures and go over them and answer any questions that the parents may have. He wants the parents to get involved in the booster club. He wants the parents to help sell tickets at the game. He wants to help parents do the concessions at the game. He wants the parents around his program to be involved in his program and have that relationship, because once you form that relationship with parents, then you can start having some conversation as, you may have overstepped your bounds. Playing time we're never going to discuss. And I think every athletic administrator is going to back you up on playing time, because once you start talking playing time about one student athlete, then you're going to have another conversation with another student athlete about playing time. But it's really inviting those parents in and keeping them involved in the program and basically using them to help you run your program, but establishing that relationship is first and foremost.
Yeah, and that's just such a great example of what we talk about in still fairly new 716 partnering with parents. That coach has truly partnered with them on several different levels. And then, as you said, when they have to talk about something challenging, playing time or whatever it is, the coach already has that relationship with them. Great stuff.
Well, because most coaches want to keep parents as far away from the program as possible, which then in turn really turns disastrous. And I think things get blown out of proportion. And I don't want to say blown out of proportion, but things get misinterpreted when they don't have an understanding of who the coach is, what's the coach's mission, what's the vision, does it align with the school, all those different things. Everyone interprets something different in every way. And if you don't have control of that situation with your parents and community coaches, and the community coach doesn't understand the expectations of the athletic department, the school, then the district, then everything just gets lost in translation, which leads to a lot of problems.
Yeah, and again, you're so right. The travel AU community sports program, and it's not a right or wrong, good or bad, but it is very different, as you said. The kids pay their money, and okay, parents, thanks a lot, we'll see you later. But the school-based setting, it's completely different.
Correct. I mean, if you're in that outside entity of sports and the parents start complaining, it's like, how many high school coaches would love to say, well, you don't like it, take your kid and leave. Now, it's funny, you can probably do that in Florida since we're an open enrollment state. That actually is happening in Florida. Kids are going to other schools and coaches are saying that. But educational based athletics is very different. And I think as an athletic administrator, whatever your expectations, policies, and procedures, those need to be relayed to your community coach, who really doesn't have an idea of what it's like to be in a classroom all day long with 30, 40 students, or just the educational background and process of how educational based athletics work. Young athletic directors, even old athletic directors, just take for granted what we think is common sense. For example, we had a situation with a community coach that's offering girls a ride to the game. Well, that was probably a common practice in the club world or in the outside world, but in educational based athletics, when you have a male coach and a female softball player, people tend to get a little bit leery about that. And And maybe so in the outside world, but the issue is with educational based athletic is there's a hierarchy. There's a coach, then there's an athletic director, then there's a principal, then there's a hopefully a district athletic director. There is a chain of command that those parents can follow to voice their concerns where they're not so much in the outside world of sports outside of schools.
Yeah, absolutely. Many times that community coach, they've had success, they've kind of built a name for themselves. A parent might recommend them to you, hey, Dan or Jake, we need a softball coach or a soccer coach, talk to this person. And so they come in without having all that background, that you and I have, or that a teacher coach has. And again, we're not, for our listeners, we're not, slamming community coaches, but
No,
the two are very different. They're both great, but there's things, as Dan said, that community coach, that an AD, if they're doing their job, they're going to let that community coach know and inform them so they can do the very best job they can for their kids.
and we have some great community coaches in our county, and they're second to none. And I don't want them to leave, and I get nervous when they do leave. But you just got to understand that the upbringing and the expectations are different. And as an athletic director, the main point of today is when you hire a non-teacher as a coach, just have that conversation with them so at least you can say you did, because we're in a world now where if that community coach does something, they're going right to the athletic administrator. Did you have that conversation with them? Did you, they're always looking for someone else to blame,
Right.
besides the person that actually did it. So you have to cover yourself as an athletic administrator. Because like you said, there are some great community coaches. They are recommended. They were successful on the travel ball or the club arena. And they want that coach part of the high school to bring that, hopefully that same prestige to the high school team as this coach has done to his travel team or his club team. But they are different. And you just need to make sure as an athletic administrator that you have that conversation with that community coach on what the expectations are being an educational based athletics.
Yeah, absolutely. Just another great point, Dan. It's always wonderful to sit with you on these. If one of our listeners wants to reach out, pick your brain a little bit more, what's the best way they can get in touch with you?
Best way to get a hold of me, like I said, and I'll say it every episode, is via my cell phone. You can reach out anytime, call or text 863-661-0647. Again, that's 863-661-0647.
And again, for new listeners or for regular listeners, this is episode number 25. Back in episode 24, if you somehow missed that, you need to go back and listen all the way to the very end. You'll be glad that you did. So again, this is Team Building Tips with Dan Talbot. We'll see you again next week. Remember, the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews get uploaded to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on Team Building Tips. Once again, we appreciate everybody listening to Team Building Tips and the podcast. We want to give a shout out to all of our sponsors: Sideline Interactive, indoor scoring tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com for more information. We also want to say thanks to Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. Their touchscreen consoles for school record boards, for Hall of Fames, they're just fantastic. You need to go to vitalsignswalloffame.com or email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com to find out about their products. I want to say thanks to Huddle. Go to huddle.com. As a football coach, I used Huddle. As an AD, we were a Huddle school, and our coaches just loved their products. Go to huddle.com and see how your school can become a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Gipper. If you're watching this on YouTube, the virtual backdrop that I have, that's a Gipper template. It's just one of thousands of different templates that you can use to brand your school social media. Go to Gipper.com, mention the podcast, and get 10% off. I want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack. They sponsor the Athletic Director Toolbox segment of our regular podcast. If you've never done a survey to take the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out. Go to athleticsurveys.com or email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. We also want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com and find out how to start selling tickets online at your school. We also want to say thanks to Final Forms, the industry leader in registration. Go to finalforms.com/Jake to get started with Final Forms. Help out your stakeholders, your coaches, and you as an AD with Final Forms. And we want to say thanks to Snap Mobile. Go to onsnap.com. That's onsnap.com and check out all the different aspects of the Snap Mobile platform. Fundraising, website construction, you name it. Ordering spirit gear. That's onsnap.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time on team building tips and just about every day on the Educational AD Podcast.